Hey folks, and welcome to the Counter Clipping Show. This is anniversary episode number 75 for May 23rd, 2022. We are, as you can see, currently drinking. We're still trying to finish the Oban Little Bay off. And I've poured myself, I got a bit of a neck ache today, so I've poured myself a little extra. And by a little extra, I mean a lot extra. That's all good. And we are still clipping Race for Bastogne. I think this is the second week of Race for Bastogne, and I might be still doing it next week. We'll see. I am doing some clipping on the side right now for reasons we'll get to, although we won't explore that in detail tonight. Let me push some buttons here to get everything posted, which I should have done. Normally I do this when the music's going, but unfortunately, we had some last-minute audio problems. Those are always fun. I don't know why the mic gain was like outrageously high, and I'm like, oh, this sounds terrible. And that's actually why I'm wearing headphones. So let me take the headphones off, too. Because I prefer to do audio testing with headphones on because I have a better sense of the volume. If it's at 30, I know what it's going to sound like. So anyway, we do have some stuff to talk about tonight. The topic of the evening is single system gamers versus what I'm calling, for at least for tonight, game hoppers. I am firmly in the game hopper camp. I hop from game to game to game to game all the time. OCS is kind of my exception to that. The one thing that I continue to play regularly, although we've now had 3 weeks in a row when I haven't played it. So there's that. So I'd like to remind everybody to please do thumbs up the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to help support the channel, I'm going to try and vary the verbiage a little bit to compactify it. Not so much in the live streams, but in the regular videos. You'll start to see that as the next round of videos comes up next week, really. But if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the links in the video description to the Patreon, the merch store, and the Ko-Fi. I'm increasingly irritated with the merch store Spring, because I ordered a sweatshirt from them in December, and it hasn't shown up yet, and they kind of blew me off. And it takes an awful long time to get paid out here. I am also currently pretty sweet on BCS. Speaking of that, before we get started, let's pull the chat over, and let's say hello to Iggy Cricktal, Matt Taylor, Board Game Geezer, Strelnikov, Wade Moore, Fast Hines, Bayonet Brandt from the Armchair Dragoons, Agray Day, Rob Johnson, Husa, Stigler is in the house, Christopher Prest, Captain CC Letow, Menders, Perfidious Albion. We got a whole bunch of, a small number of folks dominating the chat so far. Rick Cox, David Imperato, Daniel Barney, Matt Davidson, Tim Zales, Mike Anthony, Daniel, Joe Perez, Jeff Anderson, Dave 1013, Bill Simone, William Bird, Marty Sample, Mo Romaniuk, Tom MC. We'll get to that question. That's an interesting statement that you've just made there. Jason W, John Clark, Harry Z, Bill Broadhurst, Chris K, Mark Hodkins, I'm stumbling over that for some reason. Mark Hodkinson, Charles Latora, the immortal Fucko is in the house. William Aarons, Kevin Paulson, Jacob Guernsey, Vishka from Chandler, Arizona. Welcome to the stream. Now I got to figure out where everybody went here. Dicey Odds, Bob Moriarty, Daniel Silverthorne, Matt F, Rob Johnson, I think we got you already. Todd Walser, Alex, Ken X or Ken 10, Dave Tomko, Doug Sunseth is in the house. Hex to Hex, John Stanley, Bob Mosdahl. Bob, welcome to the stream as well. James Davis is in CLE, my own hometown. Dustin Mitchell, Carl Creeder from the Wargame Bootcamp. So, sorry if I missed anybody there, but the YouTube has provided me with an imperfect system. What can I say? I'll remind you that Super Chats are on. There's a new thing called Super Thanks that's on now, which you can actually do if you want. Not while the video is alive. That's the difference between that and Super Chats and Super whatever the other super thing is called. The Super chats are most useful here. First of all, they're much appreciated, but super chats are super useful here because a lot of times the chat will go by faster than I can keep track of it, and the super chat text will jump out at me because it's in a giant banner on my side of things, so I won't miss your question or comment, but I will try and get to everybody that I can. So I'd like to welcome everybody once again to the stream. So thanks for stopping by. We did do our inaugural role-playing stream last night, and some format discussions are occurring behind the scenes on that, so it's going to be a bit different next time, but we are still on target for that June 20... What's the date on that we're going to do it? Because I was just about to say June 22nd, and that's nonsense. That's not what it is. It is 2 weeks from yesterday, so actually June 5th is the next role-playing live stream. So tune in for that. One of the motivations behind kind of spinning that off to its own thing is that hopefully, we'll see if this works or not, I will be able to push more of that conversation to that show rather than cluttering up the Wargames show with it. So the folks who are strictly here for Wargaming should appreciate that. We've got 106 here already. We did have a giveaway last night, by the way. So that sounding like the first several RPG live streams will have giveaways. So we are trying to keep this organized here. So let me circle back before I forget it to the comment that was made by Tom MC, who imagines that miniature gamers are more invested in finding the one system simply because of financial and time interest. Actually think the opposite is true, because the financial and time interest don't go into the rules, they go into the miniatures. And the miniatures tend to continue to be useful regardless of what game you're playing. So I suspect that miniature players, all other things being equal, of course, and miniature players, feel free to correct me on this, because I am not an authority on that, but it seems to me likely that miniature players will actually maybe experiment to a greater degree. And I thought about including video games in the general thesis statement, that some players play lots of different games and some players play just a few games, but game players don't really do that. It's weird to see a video game player that sticks with one game consistently year in and year out. And I appreciate that people come back to stuff, but this is a phenomenon that I see a lot in role-playing games, particularly when that game is D&D, and to a somewhat lesser extent, I think, in war games. The big category in which I think we do see it in war games is with ASL players, and actually with whiff players. I've seen whiff players who really don't play anything but whiff as well. Before we get into the big discussion, though, let's mention that we are still playing Pacific War. We wrapped up the first battle scenario, which is the Wake Island scenario, which we liked very much, and I think I talked about this last week. My advice for those learning the game is do not tarry too long in the engagement scenarios. You do like 3 of them, maybe an extra one if you really feel like you need to reinforce some particular point, but otherwise move on to the battle scenarios. It started to flow in a fairly natural way once we moved to the battle scenarios, just working off the sequence of play. We're going to do Coral Sea next. Coral Sea is going to be interesting because it is battle scenario number 2, so it's the next one in the line. But because we're all relatively familiar with it, because I personally have played the flat top Coral Sea scenario about 4 or 5 times. And I've done a little bit of reading about the battle, so I have some idea of what's going on, what the situation is, so on and so forth. So more so than I have read about the Wake Island situation, for example. So, and of course, we've all seen that masterpiece of historical realism, Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor, if you needed any to bone up on your facts on the Pearl Harbor situation. That is, please feel free to put your hate mail in the comments below. That is totally okay. Scotch. Anyway, we got a sort of burnt umber color and a purple color that momentarily bled themselves together here. We also do have some Wargame news. This is not a news show. But occasionally there will be, news stuff that I would like to talk about. And today is one of those days. So let's hop over to that. And here we are with the GMT update from May 19th. We missed this for last week's show, not by a whole lot, but they had a weekend at the warehouse. And as usual, if you really want all the details on here, go ahead and go to GMT's website and read the thing. I am going to blow through here and hit the highlights, which include the new stuff and the ordering schedule and things like that. They talk about some stuff that looks like it may have gotten delayed. New Combat Commander titles in the works. People who really like Combat Commander, and there are a lot of them, will be really excited about that. 18 India has jumped to the front of the 18XX queue. That is not something that I ordered. Rebellion Britannia and Zhang He, which I'm probably not pronouncing in an authentic Chinese fashion, are the two new P500s. And we'll let me pull these up too, and we'll take a little bit closer look at those in a second here. We're not going to be doing an in-depth treatment. But I'll give you a brief overview here. Okay, so this is the box back for Banish the Snakes, which is Kevin McPartland's new game coming from GMT. 2 new Tabletop Simulator modules for Fields of Fire and Flashpoint South China Sea. New games and restocks from Ve Victus, Champ de Bataille, pronunciation unknown. New stock from Hexasim is Last Eagles Quatre Bras and Last Eagles Lenny. Here's a bunch of designer interviews with a variety of people. Here's looks like a new GMT shirt. Feel free to order that if you want. P500 editions, we'll talk about that in a second. But in addition, they have reprints. A new printing of Ardennes 44, which is excellent and which I do highly recommend. Really, any game in that series. I haven't played them all, but I have played Ardennes 44, and it's very good. It might be my go-to Bulge game, but bear in mind that Footprint has an impact on me saying that, right? I mean, it's a lot less of a project to play than, say, Vogt am Rhein or the other Vogt am Rhein or Time for Trumpets or something like that. Recent P500 editions, looking at this, Norman Conquest hit its number. That is the new Men of Iron volume. Very excited about that. Otherwise, none of this stuff is incredibly new here. We'll look at the actual P500s in a minute. New P500s on the horizon, a fast-playing CDG based on Twilight Struggle. There have been several of those. I would actually like people to take a look at Borican 2, and maybe you decide you're not going to pre-order it. I mean, certainly I make that decision all the time with this stuff. But do take a look at it. It looks interesting. The history is interesting, and it is on a topic. Is it a war game? Maybe not, but it is a historical game that is covering history that you don't see very much. Last Blitzkrieg, which I haven't had a chance to play. There's a Blind Sword South Mountain game, or is that the new thing that's coming from Herman? We'll talk about that, I guess. Coming events. This is San Diego Historical Convention team is doing a Levy and Campaign Fest on Saturday, June 4th. If you're interested in participating in this, my advice is to hop on it right away because they do have a cap. So if they sell out and you're left standing in the cold shivering, that is your fault. There's a new digital magazine called Conflicts of Interest coming. There'll be more news about that. Actually, tune in last week's show with Dan where we talked to Bobby Factor about it. It does look interesting. All of the Levy and Campaign stuff is going to cross the P500 line with relatively little trouble, I think. There's a Frank Chadwick's ETO update, blah, blah, blah. Trying to get down to the new stuff. Here we go. Okay. Charging and shipping. They have finished P500 shipping for Almoravid. They intend on May 10th, which is already passed, to charge for CDG Solar System, Churchill Third Printing, and Red Storm Baltic approaches. I can confirm that they have in fact charged for those items. I'm not sure if they did it on the 10th, but they did do it. I got hit for Red Storm Baltic approaches, so they say they should be finished with those by the end of May. I have not yet received a shipping notification, but it's not like I have a crowd of people beating my door down to play Red Storm at this exact moment. Next charge will be in early June for Empire of the Sun 4th printing. If, I have said this, and I will say it again in an upcoming video next week, if you don't have Empire of the Sun, that's another highly recommended game. Highly recommended by me, that is. It is probably one of the best wargame designs of the last couple of decades. It is eminently replayable, and it is one of the few games that's kind of as narrow as it is that I think probably folks could make that their only wargame and have a fulfilling wargame hobby and just play an Empire of the Sun over and over again. I think it's that good. Now, I don't do that, but I think people could do that. So, At Sea, arrival expected early to mid-June. Fall of Saigon, Flashpoint South China Sea, Great Battles of Julius Caesar, counter trays, and white and red and white boxes. They've been out of all of that for some time, so it will be good for them to have counter trays back in print, especially now that there is competition. See the Aegis counter trays video that I and everyone have done now. At the printer, but no ship date yet. Battles for the Shenandoah. Stigler may have some wisdom to impart about that in the chat. Charioteer, which is what it says on the box. Cuba Libre, Fields of Fire, Bulge Campaign, Fire in the Lake, 3rd printing. Don't need that because I already have Fire in the Lake. Musket and Pike Dual Pack, which I absolutely have ordered. Norway 1940, a PQ-17 expansion. I'm thinking about ordering that. I think PQ-17 is a little bit underrated, but part of that is because it's hard to play. It's unsoloable. It's built on hidden information, and if you don't have the hidden information, you really can't play it, and I think it would be very difficult to develop, not impossible, but, difficult to develop a good solitaire system. For Skies Above Britain, Stalingrad 42 expansion. Going to the printer in June, Inferno, which is another Levian campaign game. Banish the Snakes, Dominant Species, Marine, 2nd printing. Next War Poland, 2nd edition. Next War Supplement number 3, which I have pre-ordered, I think. I guess I should check. And Twilight Struggle, Red Sea. And then in final art and proofing, this list is getting narrower as we go by. The Barracks Emperors, which looks interesting. Red Dust Rebellion, which is the sci-fi coin game that they've been working on. That actually, I haven't pre-ordered that, but I'm probably going to pre-order that. And if I don't pre-order it, I'll probably end up buying it at random from somebody. Paths of Glory, also an excellent game. Border Reavers, a lot of people have expressed interest in that to me. Battle of White Plains, I actually have ordered. That is part of the Battles of the American Revolution series, and it is one of the fancy new ones with a fancy mounted map and all that jazz. I was listening to an American Revolution podcast, so I got kind of interested in that. In the art department, Clash of Sovereigns, Congress of Vienna, No Retreat, Russian Front, new printing. Why is that in the art department? Isn't the art department done with that? It's the 3rd printing. Panzer North Africa, Seas of Thunder, Skies Above the Reich, 2nd printing, Russian Campaign, Deluxe 5th edition. I want to say that this is where that's been for a long time. I am hearing, and I didn't get to listen to Compass Games broadcast the other day, but little bird told me that their version of Russian Campaign, which just came out, is already out of print. So clearly there is a thirst for a new version of Russian Campaign. I've done an unboxing of theirs. Has that landed yet? I believe it has. And it looks pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with it. So I think the exceptionally long and opaque delay for this has probably cost it some interest. But then again, I don't think people will be necessarily canceling their pre-orders, but the more time that passes, the more likely it is that their credit cards will have expired. So that's an issue. Nearing art department readiness. What do we got here? I'm looking for Barbarossa Army Group North and Army Group South, and they're not on here, so we're done. Did Ardwulf's Lair make the cut this time? Let's see what they put up. Pacific War. Okay, this video got a lot of traction, too. So, all right, the 2 new games, Rebellion Britannia, designed by Maurice Suckling and Daniel Burt. I don't really know a lot about this, except that this is the map. It's the Britons rebelling against the Romans. That is an interesting topic. and I don't know enough about this to really give you even an impression yet. On the other hand, Zhang He here is designed by Jeff Engelstein and David Thompson, two designers well known to me and highly regarded by me. And this is not only a very interesting topic, but this is probably something I will order. I think this is the only like map piece that is available right now, but this sounds very interesting. Haven't ordered it yet. Dave 1013. We're obviously going to have to talk to Herman at some point about upcoming Blind Sword stuff, because I know he's got like new iterations of Blind Swords coming as well, but I'm more into the Civil War stuff personally. All right, so from Multiman Publishing, Sword and Fire Manila is shipping. We have confirmed that it is shipping. People are starting to get it. As far as I can tell, they might be uncomfortable with me saying this, but as far as I can tell, they had I don't know how many people, 1,843 people bought this, pre-ordered this thing, and as far as I can tell, Multiman can ship about 80 copies a day. So it'll be a while, maybe, for your particular copy to land, but it is coming. I'm sure it will be delightful when it arrives, and it is a large product. The ASL Overlay Bundle is a new thing on pre-order. It is basically all of the overlays ever. I didn't see it as necessary to order this, because I have all the overlays, except the ones that would have shown up, if any, in Doomed Battalions. And I even have those. I just have the Avalon Hill versions. And I'll order a new version of Doomed Battalions just to update that when it comes out. They are Rick Cox. AGN and AGS are not on the list. You are correct, sir. So I don't know. However, there is an interview with Vance Von Voorhees in the latest C3I. Now, I haven't read the article. I did the video. You'll see the flip-through video next week. But I haven't read the article yet. And I'm kind of hoping Vance will address that, the timetable in that interview. Let's hope. And the other thing that they've got in the pipeline is this thing, Crown and Crescent. I forget who the designer is, Brian Collars. And this is South Carolina in the American Revolution, which is like, okay, maybe that's interesting. But what makes it definitely interesting is that it is based on the system from Angola, which is very highly regarded. Now, I haven't played Angola. People keep telling me I would love it, which is probably true. But I am interested in this just for that reason. And then just today, they have announced that here is a reprint of Hakapala, the Finns expansion for Advanced Squad Leader. A lot of people felt like they were never going to reprint this. I suspected that they was always going to get pushed back and we were never going to see a reprint. As unhappy as I am with this treatment of the Finns, because I believe they're significantly overpowered by this module, I am glad that it is going to become available again for those people who need it. Now, I don't need it. I have it already, so I'm good. And right now, the only, unless they do another Stalingrad historical module, which is not unlikely, I think I'm good for ASL until they come up with a new printing of Doomed Battalions, like I mentioned. Marty Sample played Crown and Crescent at CSW Dallas, and he says it is a must-buy for Angola fans. So bear that in mind. Roger Hemsath, first of all, welcome back. Russian campaign, whether or not it's a good game, is evidence that publishing war games can be less ethical than one would hope. There are like at least a dozen directions I can take that comment. So DCB, that, well, you know, maybe the game will include the hypothetical battle that did not occur. So that is possible. So let's hop back over here. I've been doing a lot of setup on OBS over the last few weeks, and I'm probably throwing it all away now. But not throwing it away, but it'll be less important as we transition to StreamYard, which I will talk about in a future video. So that is more or less the wargaming news. Rebel Fury, 3 years waiting. I do think that you got a big COVID-related delay because Mark Herman and the materials for Rebel Fury were trapped on opposite sides of the country. Yeah, Brent, I'm still, it has admittedly been a long day and my neck hurts, and I still am not sure what specifically you are referring to. And I'm not asking you to explain it in the chat. It's okay. I am aware of the reputation of the so-called Swamp Fox, however. So if that's what we're talking about. The map maker for Rebel Fury was Rick Barber, and I believe he finished those maps. But yeah, Rick Barber is no longer with us, unfortunately. And Agray Day says Revolution Games is having a sale right now. Had they contacted me, I would have been able to mention, hey, Revolution Games is having a sale right now. Go check it out. Let's take a look at the webpage. Poke around. Look. Hell, I might even have spent some money. Stranger things have happened. I do not have a ton of Revolution Games product, but I have a reasonably high opinion of the stuff that I do have. So, purple, blue, and burnt umber, or whatever the hell that stuff is. Blue. Okay. We're clipping this, I forget what this German formation is. Pan's Vanguard's got a pretty good reputation. Yes, Tarleton's Quarter. Yes, that is true. That all happened down in the southern theater of the American Revolution as well. And that is where Cornwallis spent quite a bit of his time. So, oh dear. Stigler has had a honeydew problem. It happens, I understand. I'm lucky that my wife understands this whole streaming thing and is willing to humor me while I am streaming. So it is all good. Revolution Games seems to do sales relatively frequently, and their sales are pretty good. Let's look at the web page. All right, Warsaw 1920. Battle of Warsaw 1920. Okay, that sounds interesting. That's something we haven't seen that much of that specifically. On the other hand, it's like not just Warsaw. So we have seen this before, actually. Not too much. This Russo-Polish War stuff or Polish-Soviet War stuff. We have seen a few games on that topic, but not that many. So it'd be interesting to see this take on it. The Day Was Ours we've seen already. That looks like the new thing. For those who haven't seen it, the Deadly Woods Ted Racers Battle of the Bulge game. This looks good. I haven't not ordered it because I buy too much stuff already. Kernstown, $20 off the boxed edition. That's pretty good. So that's looks like they've got a nice little new release. Okay, so this is the new release price, $35. Is that a Ziploc? That is a Ziploc game. And they're in the large queue. There are unboxings scheduled of these new Blind Swords games, which we will get to them eventually. I'm settling into a new video release cadence, which is going to include the bi-weekly Zheng He game is about I don't know if it's about the Chinese Admiral Zheng He specifically, but it's about the Chinese explorations of the Indian Ocean space that historically occurred and then were shut down by the Emperor, who said, we do not wish to deal with these heathenish outlanders, or something to that effect. So that is the basic premise. It's a very interesting topic. So I am going to I agree. I mean, at least it's always interesting, and it's a solitaire game. Let me jump on that. It is a solitaire design, so it probably has a pretty strong narrative through line, is my guess. Whew. Well, yeah, Mel Gibson in The Patriot. That's kind of a pretty bad movie, as you're doubtless aware. So I would, not necessarily recommend it. But it did kind of make Jason Isaacs better known. I was hoping that too. Hey, there could be a whole other half of the map for all we know. So he could be crossing the Pacific Ocean or exploring the all the Pacific Islands. That could be neat, actually. Talk about your what ifs there. So Findle70 says it's 3 bad movies made into a single movie, and it does have as much terrible shit as 3 terrible movies. So, hopping back over to this. Mark Hodgkinson is playing Pacific War. Definitely, I mean, it's not going to take, none of those scenarios are going to take us 6 months to play through. I don't think. I think we figured out that the campaign, at our normal play cadence, that the campaign scenario, the strategic scenario, would take us, I think, about 8 months to play. Now, that's long, but we've played longer. We've played twice that. So, the strategic scenario is not out of the question, but so what I think I want to do is play through the battle scenarios, all of which are probably going to take an evening or two. And then pick 1 or 2 of the campaign scenarios. I really like the look of... the Guadalcanal scenario looks good. And if we skip a bunch of battle scenarios, then we're probably going to skip to the Guadalcanal campaign scenario. But I really like the early conquest. I forget what the scenario is called, but it's the early conquest. It's basically December 41 to, I don't know, whenever, March 42, of the Japanese running hog wild in the Dutch East Indies. Trying to break through to the South Pacific. So, very curious to see how that one will play out. Husa was looking for a monster war game on par with Campaign for North Africa. War in the Pacific from Decision Games. I believe it to be even more monstery than Campaign for North Africa. And who knows, maybe it's playable. That's not its reputation. I think you'd have a bit of a struggle. But I think if you are looking for a monster that borders on the unplayable, I think that is the most unplayable thing I can think of. Roger, I don't know what's going on with that. I have speculated on that in the past and been told I was wrong. So I don't have anything meaningful to add on that situation. Roger's talking about the Russian campaign that's coming out from Compass, and then the other Russian campaign that's coming out through Consim Press, which is John Krantz from GMT. I don't know. I don't have an explanation for that. That is a GMT and John Krantz question at this point. I am unwilling to speculate any further, just because I don't want to propagate bad information. It does look awkward. I can agree with that. So, on the other hand, it's Russian campaign, right? I mean, there's already a bunch of other takes on Russian campaign out there, including at least one that Avalon Hill did, Russian Front. Plus now we've got the Jedco Russian campaign from Compass. We have what's the damn thing called? Russia Besieged, also from Compass, which is kind of Russian campaign with some extra chrome. And I mentioned Russia. I guess I can talk about this. I mentioned Russia Besieged because I am clipping Russia Besieged as my side clipping project. And the reason I am clipping Russia Besieged is because of this thing. This is a tiny box, but inside this box came the Ares counter clipping kit. And the Ares counter clipping kit is a little jig that you can use to clip counters with. I will have a full... It was provided to me by our very own Kyle Reese. So thank you, Kyle. I am in the middle of... I want to clip an entire game with it. And Russian campaign was the perfect game for that, because Those counters don't fit in the 2.5 millimeter clipper, or the 2 millimeter clipper for that matter. So we'll have a video review of that product after I have finished clipping Russia Besieged in it. But preliminary analysis indicates that I will continue to be using the Oregon Laminations standard tool as my bread and butter counter cutter, but I will also find a use for the Aries device as well, because it actually does work pretty good. So it's, you know, it's a lot of manual thing that you've got to build the muscle memory for. I cannot comment on the differences between the Jedco version of Russian Campaign and the Avalon Hill version of Russian Campaign, but I would think you'd be able to find somebody that knows, but I don't. Perfidious Albion says Russia Besieged is essentially Russian Campaign on steroids. Yeah, but they're fairly mild steroids, okay? I've been on steroids. I love steroids. I wish I could be on steroids all the time, because they make me feel fantastic. Unfortunately, they make your balls fall off. So that's not practical. But Russian Besieged doesn't feel like insanely more complicated than Russian Campaign. It is somewhat more complicated. It does have more. There's more of everything, pretty much. So if it's Russian Campaign on steroids, they're pretty laid back steroids. So Michael Manners, thanks for stopping by. Antietam is hard to make a balanced game, exactly as you say, John Stanley, unless you have McClellan rules. Now, is it still up behind me? None But Heroes, the line of battle Antietam, actually does a pretty good job, because the McClellan rules are pretty much built into the game, right? The order system takes care of a lot of that extra McClellan friction, if you will. When I had the steroids, you mean? So we do have a South Mountain and Cedar Mountain games for GBACW already. That is correct. All right. Moving right along. This is the Panzer Lair. We are now clipping Panzer Lair. I need to read those designer's notes. Yes, Iggy Krichtal, that's true. So line of battle is the regimental level. Let me start this from the beginning. So there's a Dean Essig series called the Civil War Brigade series, okay, and it is a brigade level Civil War battles game, okay, and it includes rules for orders that you have to issue with your commanders and then make rolls to see when they get accepted and can be acted upon, okay? At some point in the evolution of the Civil War Brigade series, they extended it to the Regimental sub-series, which is more or less the same game, but a regimental scale. And then in the process of revising that to a new edition, it was decided that they were just going to kind of take a step back and start fresher. And the result of that effort is the Line of Battle series. So it's kind of the updated version of the Regimental sub-series of the Civil War Battle series. This can get confusing, as you can imagine. But all of those games have orders rules. The Line of Battle rules are cleaner, I think, than the Regimental sub-series rules. So I'd prefer to play with those. You can allegedly... Not allegedly, I mean, you can, it's just a bit of work, play the RSS games with the Line of Battle rules. But I would prefer to have the updated counters too, so I think the counters are a little easier to deal with. William Ahrens, thank you so much. Concerning Napoleonic era game systems, are the Operational Studies Group series games significantly different from the La Bataille series games? Yeah, absolutely. But So they are about 2 orders of magnitude less. So we're clear here. We're talking about these. We're talking about the battle games. This is the library of Napoleonic battles. The other series that Daniel Barney, thank you so much. We'll get to you in just a second. The other series that OSG has going is the Campaigns of Napoleon series, which is the operational series. However, it's not correct to think that Library of Napoleonic Battles is tactical and Campaigns of Napoleon is operational. Library of Napoleonic Battles is really kind of grand tactical, and if you play some of the campaigns, not all the campaigns necessarily, but some of the campaigns will have a significant operational flavor to them. The rules are about 2 orders of magnitude less complicated than the rules for La Bataille. La Bataille is a battalion level system, so there's a lot more counters on the map, and the maps are a whole lot bigger. So if you really want the maximum, fine granularity, Napoleonic tactical experience, La Bataille is where you go, at least until Glory and Empire comes out. Maybe that will unseat La Bataille, although I rather doubt it. But then you have to make additional La Bataille-related decisions, like which La Bataille rules do I use? I don't know. There's a million of them, and everybody plays by all of them simultaneously. And it's in a fascinating but has to be frustrating for the players type of way. So Daniel Barney asks, what is my feelings about MMP's Storm over Jerusalem? Is that a game I'd consider purchasing? Have I played any of the Storm series games? So those are the Area Impulse games, which have a very good reputation. Also, another thing, which is not necessarily significant here, but I'll mention it anyway, is that Siege of Jerusalem. Now, this is about the Roman Siege of Jerusalem in like 64 AD or whatever that is. The one, I believe, the one that overlaps with the Year of the Four Emperors, but I could be wrong. But I believe it's that revolt, that Jewish revolt. There were several. the starting with Nero, the Jews stopped liking the Roman Empire very much. Although there's, go ahead and watch Life of Brian if you want actually some decent historical background on that. So the short answer to the question, though, Daniel, is that I have not played any of the Area Impulse games. I'm not sure which one was the first one, but the sort of prototypical Area Impulse games are things like Storm over Arnhem, and there's a Storm over Stalingrad that I think was done by MMP. This series started with Avalon Hill. Thunder at Casino was another one. There was at least one other one that Avalon Hill did. And I'm blanking on which one that was, but and then MMP has done a few, and then some other folks have done some using that system too. So it is using that system. It is a well-regarded system. I know that there are some people excited about Storm over Jerusalem. So if you are interested in it topically, I think that you will probably not be massively, unless you're a real stickler for hexes, which it's the Area Impulse system. It's an area map. I think you'll probably not be terribly displeased with the game. Brant, thanks for stopping by. Trying to catch up to the chat here. Yes, if the Union, Stigler says, if the Union's free to use their entire force at Antietam, they will wipe the Confederates off the map. That's basically true. So there has to be some kind of command. I mean, I kind of insist on some kind of command level limitations in war games anyway. I find that usually they're not satisfying unless there's some kind of mechanism to replicate the unpredictability of command control in whatever topic we're talking about. So, Fire on the Mountain, that's a Grateful Dead song. Turning Point Stalingrad, that's the one I'm thinking of. And Harry Ryan, welcome to the stream, mentioned Storm over Dien Ben Phu, which I believe was multi-man, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. So that was the Fast Times, gives us all 4 there. Well, Kyle Reese mentions siege games from Alicia to Dien Bien Phu. Certainly, Alicia itself is a fascinating battle for because it's kind of a double siege or maybe even a triple siege, depending on how you think of it. I'm thinking of the Grateful Dead song. I don't know. The Marshall Tucker may have done it too, or maybe it's the same song or the different song with the same name. For all I know. I don't think the OSG games are particularly complicated, so we're clear on this. They're a touch more complicated than Napoleon's Last Battles, the SPI version, but not by much. Whereas any of the Labatt games, even the simple Labatt, which is the Marie-Louise Labatt rules, are still and easily 1.8 orders of magnitude more complicated than the OSG Library of Napoleonic Battles. So that doesn't mean they're bad. That just means they're more they're more complicated and they're more work, and they take longer to play too, and have much larger footprints. The nice thing about the library battles is if you want a big meaty game, you can play one of the big campaigns, and if you want a short game that you can play in an afternoon, you can play really almost any of the most of the battles can be played in an afternoon. Some of the really big ones like Leipzig will take probably a little longer than that, but not more than like a weekend. Well, even as Stigler points out that in even GBACW you need more McClellan rules for commitment. That's true, but GBACW has a command mechanism as well with the chits. So that does a lot of the heavy lifting for McClellan in that case. Mooseworks Plastic Soldiers. Thanks so much. I am going to I'll give you an opinion on this, but with the caveat that I am not a miniatures expert. 3 to 6 millimeter modern warfare for a solo war game with limited time and space. I have had Command Decision recommended to me very highly by somebody whose opinion on that topic I respect. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was Command Decision World War II or was it modern? I remember it being modern, but I never played it. So, and 3 to 6 millimeter. There's 3D printed 3 or 6 millimeter figures that you can get now too. So I unfortunately can't be super duper helpful there. But the question raises an interesting point of solitaire miniatures play. How relevant is that? Or how prevalent is that? I guess I should say. Okay, so Matt Davison mentions that Command Decision was World War I, II, and modern. And then 2 other people are saying it was World War II. I remember seeing it in the context of World War II, but I think there were 2 editions of it too. Doug Sunseth mentions modern Spearhead, good for modern micro armor. So that might be a place that you can look at. Abraxas MF mentions that there are a ton of small battles in the OSG Library of Napoleonic Battles. Yes, that's true. I mean, remember, that's going to happen because there's fewer big battles, right? The series is covering not just your Wagram and your Waterloo and your maybe Marengo, although Marengo's not as big as the others, or your Auerstadt, the big, or Leipzig, where there's 750,000 men on the field, or Borodino, which is a huge battle. It's covering a lot of smaller battles too. So if you look at say the Napoleon against Russia volume, you've got I think two or three big battles in there. But if you look at the Spanish battles, most of the battles not all, but most of the battles in the Peninsular War were relatively small. 3 rule sets. Stegler, you're leaving out like 3 or 4 more rule sets. Those might just be the official ones. Stigler's right about this. The the GBACW command rule really affects the corps commanders more than the army commanders. And in the case of Antietam, maybe we should have a show on Antietam. Then it's really McClellan himself who is the bottleneck, and not the corps commanders. I mean, Joe Hooker is, shall we say, somewhat aggressive, right? Which is why Lincoln hired him after he sacked McClellan, because if nothing else, he was aggressive. He just got conked on the head and was in a stupor for months. So, I would seriously, my respect for the GDW operation is such that if I were in the market for that, and if it supported what I was trying to do, that I would probably go for a command decision. And you can always change the scale, right? I mean, if it's 6 millimeters, even if it's 28 millimeters, you could change the scale. You just, have a conversion. You can do that. Yeah, the trouble, Dave 1013, is that the number of activations ranges from 1 to 4, and you really don't want to go below 1, and you don't want to go above 4, because then that core is idle for an entire hour if they don't do anything. So I do agree with Stigler here. I think you need to. I think you need a special rule, but None But Heroes has a special rule for it too. So there are some additional special command rules for. They affect everybody, but they're there to. They're there to reflect McClellan's inability to commit forces at that battle. Jeff Beeler, thank you so much. Says players tend to specialize in complex war games. I think that's true, and I think when we we're on the topic of La Bataille here, and there's people that play very little bit La Bataille as well, and I have seen that. And interestingly, a couple of the relatively serious La Bataille people that I know also play ASL, so there's that. And those are pretty complicated. Now, I don't think. So at some point there will be a show about complexity in games, okay? But tonight is not that night. So tonight, thank you, even though it's Canadian dollars. I appreciate it. The ASL is not as complicated as people think it is. That is not a statement that says it's not complicated. It is, but you can play a lot of ASL without necessarily having to deal with the really significant complexity with things like the air landing rules and the caves and the amphib landings and the night rules and stuff like that. You can play a lot of ASL and just ignore those scenarios that feature those things. So Harry Ryan says combined arms was for modern warfare, and I think it used the basic system from Command Decision, did it not? Or am I nuts about that? So I think but that said about ASL, I think ASL is more complicated, but when it comes down to nuts and bolts than La Bataille is. I think La Bataille adds a tremendous amount of complexity just in the fact that there's a confusing array of different rules systems that you have to figure out which one you're using that particular night, depending on who your opponent is. The interesting thing about that is that I mentioned this to Dan, and it's like, okay, so one person's got this rule set in his head, the other person has this rule set in their head, and Dan asks, well, who's right? And I'm like, all of them. They're all right. That's the problem. None of them's wrong. They're just looking at it from a different paradigm. And is everybody on the same page? Is the question, and if they're not, then one ends up seeing a lot of rules arguing happening at a La Bataille table. But there's, again, if you want Napoleonic tactical at that level, and as I mentioned, the OSG stuff is grand tactical, right? It's less tactical than Napoleonic than Labatai. If you really want the real tactical stuff that's the monster games is gonna take you a long time, really there's only one game in town for that, and that's Labatai. So now, William Aarons, I'm hearing that Labatai de Dresda that Callendale was playing is not the Labatai system, that it is a different system. I made that assumption as well, but I'm not running down that out-of-print game. Glory and Empire, I'm actually interested in taking a closer look at as well. It would be cool if Lock and Load, a company I like, would produce product that I was interested in. That would be swell. Fucko asks about Wellington's victory, and unfortunately, I think the general agreement is that Wellington's victory is not very good, and that the Decision Games near redesign of Wellington's victory did not solve any problems. It just introduced a bunch of its own. That seems to be the consensus about Wellington's victory. Now, on the other hand, that's not to say that those problems are not addressable. I think where to look at that series is not at Wellington's victory, but at Winter's whatever the thing's called, Winter's victory, coming from New England Simulations. That's what is gonna, I think, show what that system can do. And Jeffrey Wesovich there mentions it. Yeah, Winter's victory. I'm very interested in seeing that, because I would like there to be an alternative to Labatai. Viva l'Empereur tactical, is that the one that Stigler? Is that the one that Callendale's playing? I have complete faith in New England Simulations to actually produce a game. I do not believe for a moment that game is vaporware. And there you go. Marty chimes in, and he's proofreading it right now. New England Simulations does a game, every 3 or 4 years. Every game they do ends up being very well regarded, with a minimum of, shall we say, development problems because there was insufficient development occurring. Stigler is mad. I've made him mad by verbally confusing him with Callendale. Oh dear. I love Callendale, man. I've been watching Callendale for years. I kind of gotta be in the mood for it, but I love Callendale's channel. Iggy Cricktal says BAR is as or more complicated than Labatai. So he is referring to the Battles of the Age of Reason series. And I believe that statement to be correct. I think it is just as complicated as Labatai. However, the difference is, and this is important, is there's only one set of rules, and it's better written than really any of the Labatai rules that I've seen. So there's a lot less room to have needless arguments about rules because somebody's recollecting some different rule set at some point on the table. As Ken X just said too. So that there's a significant difference in playability between Labatai, practically, right? In principle, this shouldn't be true. If you have, players that are all on exactly the same wavelength, play together all the time, and can move quickly, they should be equivalently playable. But I think in practical terms, Battles of the Age of Reason ends up being more playable for the reasons I just mentioned. So I guess that makes Stigler Harvey Keitel, right? I mean, he can probably figure that out. Oh dear. Oh dear. We're making it weird now. I have not tried the Marcus Sumter's rule for Library of Napoleonic Battles. I guess I am confused about what the motivation behind those optional rules are. Unless that motivation is just that you don't like to push-pull CRT. Which is a reasonable position to take, but I don't have a problem with the push-pull CRT. I think it's appropriate given the grand tactical scale. Again, remember, it's not really all that tactical. It's grand tactical. Oh dear. Carl, you're killing me, Carl. Carl. Well, apparently it's First Blood based on the movie, because they fought like 8 times in the movie. Now, I mean, I can understand and sympathize with the position that push-pull CRT is boring. You know, maybe it's just not bloody enough. It does seem a bit bloodless. But what it's doing really is not forcing you. You can not do this. But what it's trying to encourage you to do is to really leverage things like flanking and stuff like that, which is, you know, how you decisively smash a formation. And you can do it on those tables when you leverage all that. You leverage the artillery, you leverage the, you know, other units that are flanking and supporting and stuff like that. So I think that's the intention, and I think it works for that. So now I haven't looked at the Stumter rules, so, you know, they could be fabulous for all I know. I haven't looked at them. So see, I think if you have that super bloody thing, then I think you have to change the scale of the game, the time scale. And I don't know that I think that makes much sense. So, saber fencing dandy. Yeah, speaking of that, who's talking about I gotta have my pinky up when I'm clipping the counters and wear a poofy shirt and stuff, and we're talking about a guy who did fencing. Really? Fencing. Hilarious. I gotta tell you, are these all the same? Yeah, they are. They are. There's 2 formations in this tray, not 1. All right. Well, let's start putting stuff away here. Let's get there. These go there. These go there. These go. It's like we need for the independence. The game system between GTS 1 and 2 went from very few independents that weren't artillery to a shit ton of independents. I have watched some of that commentary on the duels in the Duelists, and it's actually very interesting. I didn't say there was anything wrong with fencing. I have to back up and acknowledge that I didn't say anything that is wrong with fencing. I always wanted to take fencing, actually. But I got the impulse out when I did SCA heavy fighting too. I mean, they do fencing as well, but I never really got into that. Quite different. There's a lot to. How am I going to do this here? I think we'll do it this way. There's a lot to fencing at any level. Let me put it that way. William Bird asks if Washington's Crossing is worth $25 on sale. I think it is. I bought it. It is an interesting looking system. It's kind of bookkeepy. If that bothers you, maybe you'll object to it, but that doesn't bother me. So I thought it was absolutely worth it, especially on sale. It is a not Civil War, but American Revolution operational game that is inspired by, but not built on, the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War rules. So, as you can imagine, I am pleased with that particular decision. So, Who's asks, what systems would be good for 2v2 that aren't designed for team play? Some of the coin games would fall into that category. All of the... Well, okay. So there are... Of the coin games that are out, they're all 4-player games, except for the North Africa one, the... I forget what it's called. Somebody in the chat will mention the name of the French colonial coin game. I can picture the box in my head, but I can't think of the name right now. Some of those, so they're all, other than that one, they're all 4-player games, but in many cases the sides are tightly linked or loosely linked, or sometimes not really linked at all. Like in Pendragon, there's really not links between 3 of the factions, right? 2 of the factions, the Dukes and the Civitates, are kind of on a team, but the other 2 factions are just on their own, right? And the same thing is true with the Indians in Liberty or Death, and the mob in Cuba Libre, and I mean almost all of those factions have sort of a rogue element. And none of them have perfect alignment between the factions that are on the teams. I mean, I would look at, if you're looking for 4 players, I would look at those. And there's only one winner at the end, right? So whether there's a team or not, there's only one winner at the end. I'm glad I can entertain, Stigler. And apparently there's a lot of fencing aficionados here, too. Alright. Are we going to start more? I think we are. I'll do at least a few because I want to get the tray started. Jeff Anderson points out that All Bridges Burning, which is the Finland game, is 3-player. That is absolutely correct. That's new. That's why I forgot about it. Colonial Twilight, Andrew Franca, thank you for mentioning that. That is the one I was thinking of. That is a 2-player coin game. And there's a couple more that are different numbers of players in the pipeline as well. Fencing is totally cool, but it is also an activity performed in poofy shirts. That's all I'm saying, okay? And there's nothing wrong with... I mean, I have some poofy shirts. There's nothing wrong with a good poofy shirt. I've played Wing Leader, and I did not find it especially satisfying, I gotta tell you. I didn't hate it. If I played more of it, I might like it more, but I didn't hate it. I mean, on its side is kind of the same thing as, you know... top-down view, right? I mean, you know, you're subtracting a dimension either way. That said, I don't think its treatment of like the extra dimension in the rules is necessarily all that elegant. So at some point, I might do the show in costume, but we'll see. Aegis trays are working pretty well in Race for Bastogne. So the width of the trays is great. The width of the compartments is great. But the length of the compartments is really about the same length as the GMT trays. So you can't fit quite as many of them in. They still end up leaning against each other like that to some extent. And that's unfortunate. With that said, I think you're in a bit of an ideal situation with games with larger counters like these. So, Andrew Franca says, do I ever have trouble with the counter clipper clipping the edge instead of the corner? So that is the Nike swish effect that one gets with this. I did a video on this. There's two ways to approach this question, okay? On the non-deluxe, it's really impossible to misclip a counter. You can not clip enough on the deluxe model, but you really can't misclip. On these, you can misclip, and you'll end up with kind of an unattractive dog out of one side. And the clipping itself will look lopsided, so that's why we call it the little Nike swish. There's two ways to handle this. One is to turn the whole device upside down so that you can see in the slot, so that you can see that the counter is aligned in the slot, okay? This works fine. So I'm going to take a look. Let's see. Okay, it's aligned. We're going to clip. Boom. There we go. Nice corner, okay? We have a nice corner. You can't really see that, but nice. It's a nice corner. However, I don't clip upside down. I clip right side up. So what I do is I go by feel. I'm going to clip the counter, and if I feel like it's digging too much, it's taking me just too much effort to get through it, then that's because there's more blade area on the counter, and it's going to give me that swish cut. Okay, so what I do is if I feel like if it's digging too hard, I just back off, rotate to the next corner, and then I come back to that corner, and almost every time, the second time I get on that corner, I will clip it perfectly. And at this point, I am going to fit Race for Bastogne in 2 trays and some baggies. I'll tell you that. At this point, I can't really remember the last time I actually misclipped a counter with one of these. But I've also clipped 150,000 counters with these clippers. I mean, something like that. It's been a lot, right? So, you do get better at it. Stigler, that is the exact point. That is exactly what I am saying. We are not, tonight is not gaming night. We are not losing. I have lost 0 playtime to counter clipping. That is the other thing. So that's my approach with this. Block Oddity, the Aegis device, not Aegis, the Ares device is basically that exact thing. Except it's 3D printed and it is in a somewhat, I think, more robust plastic. The other concern that I have with the C4 corner rounder, it's or C4 corner cutter, or corner mutilator as I like to call it. Somebody was actually giving one away on Facebook a couple of weeks ago, and I thought about asking for it because, hey, look, I'd like to have this thing just for research purposes, okay? But what I saw, I got a buddy who's got who used that for years, and I mean, you could see the progression where gradually the plastic is wearing down as he cuts with it, and he's cutting off bigger and bigger corners until he's finally making tiny stop signs, and it's horrifying, right? Horrifying tiny stop signs. So I'm not a big fan of the C4. If you are exceptionally careful with using it, I'm guessing it is possible to not lose plastic off the edge that you are running the X-Acto blade down. But at the same time, I have seen examples where people have done that, not intentionally, but have done that and have ended up with the tiny stop sign phenomenon. So. Dave 1013 asks, after ASL, which he assumes is the most common one system choice. I think that's true. What do I consider the next most popular one system choice? And somebody here, Captain Asparagus, I agree, World in Flames. That's the one that I see the most single game players after ASL. And after that, good question. Maybe OCS. Maybe in fact, maybe OCS is number 2. Jeff Beeler, scissors. Now, I'll tell you what. My first hearing of somebody cutting corners with scissors was met with abject horror. However, I have seen games that fucko clipped with scissors, and they're really not as bad as you'd think. I would have assumed it was going to be an absolute mutilation of the counters, and it really wasn't that bad. That said, that is not a thing that I am going to do. Starfleet battles, yeah, that could be. Although I think probably most of the Starfleet battles, Jeff Beeler's right, Warhammer and 40K, but I mean we're not talking about that. Okay, that is off topic for this show. All right, so let's go back here to, and I think we're going to be done clipping. For the evening. I have 2 more, so I'll go there. That sounds good. So I think we're going to more or less get... I got all the Allied counters in this tray. I'm going to get pretty much all the German counters in this tray. And I'm going to put probably all of the counters in other counters in just baggies. The markers I'll put in baggies. I don't like to freeform clip counters either, because I did for years, and I know that I am not that accurate at it. I will be inconsistent, and that will turn... I could get a third counter tray in this box, by the way. I'm not sure I'm going to use a third counter tray for this game. That's the thing. I'm not sure I want to use another Aegis tray for markers. But I might. I don't know. We'll see. It depends how much counter clipping I get done. I do have some extra GMT trays, some older repurposed GMT trays. So, Jeff Beeler mentions Europa at Origins. Yes, we will be bringing Europa back to Origins. You can sign up for it literally now. I was actually trying to get into the Wednesday Night Traveler game, then that failed. By the time I got to it, it was all sold out. So, oops, can't do it, but, who knows. I didn't really have another slot that I could fit anything in that was occupied by games I actually wanted to play. Kyle Reese mentions the bead jewel cases from Walmart. Somebody did a video on, I forget who this was. Somebody did a video on those little bead cases that you can get for, you order them like 20 at a time, but they're only like $1 a piece or 50 cents a piece or something like that. You can get them from Amazon. And those looked interesting, and I think they did a Pacific War in that, but I think they're going to be disappointed by their sorting solution when it takes them 2 hours to set up a scenario. Christopher Prest is question mark key is not working. Der Weltkrieg. I don't think Der Weltkrieg has ever been all that popular, to be honest, which is unfortunate because I think it is actually got a lot to offer. But I think people are scared by the maps. They think they look at the maps and that's super weird and fussy, and it's really not. I mean, unless you're one of those people who actually gets vertigo from looking at the maps. I've had people say that. I certainly. You do have to get used to the maps, but it takes like an hour. So I didn't. Hissy Cat Studios. Yes, there we go. So using the old version of Pacific War before the new one came out, I set up the Pearl Harbor and Savo Island scenarios, and it took me like 90 minutes to set up each one. Now, and that was organized in 3 old Victory Games counter trays, and nicely organized, right? But it just took forever to figure out what was where. So I did a video on my organizational scheme for Pacific War, which hit it big, actually, in the terms of our space. But, certainly Decision is not the publisher of those games, but they're certainly not, like, really trying very hard to sell them either, right? Lots of people still hold Heinlein in high regard, I'd say, but, I think there's more people. I think that was a complicated guy. Let me put it that way. And I think he doesn't necessarily fit into any of the various bins that people want to fit him into. He did do a whole book of snappy sayings, some of which are fatuous nonsense. And I'd say specializationist for insects is probably one of those things. That's spoken like a person that never really worked for a living. Okay, I mean, he was a writer, and he worked for the Navy, and he was in the Navy for a while, but he was like never employed as somebody doing something, if you know what I mean. So he could afford to be a dilettante and learn all kinds of stuff that some people just don't have time to learn. Dave 10 mentions A World at War. That's certainly, I think that is in the single game gamer category as well, because it really does take a lot. And you can see it with the people that they've interviewed on the videos where they're talking to the people at the tournament. I mean, those I bet those folks don't play anything else that's remotely that complicated. Maybe they go play Arkham Horror or something on the weekend, but I mean clearly A World at War is their game. OSG is Operational Studies Group E4 Airmen. I know it's being employed, but it's not being in the private sector where you're doing a specific job. And he wasn't in the Navy that long either. Let's point that out. Christopher Prest, who's done some videos on it, on Der Weltkrieg. Let me hasten to add that Heinlein was no chicken hawk, right? Even though he had been medicaled out of the Navy, the first thing when December 8th, 1941, he busted his ass to try and get back in the service, and he did not succeed and ended up working at the Navy Yard in Philadelphia. But he did, make a contribution to the war effort. He was probably not really happy about that. There is a pretty good, and not entirely hagiographical, 2-volume biography of Heinlein that you can find on Amazon. Perfidious Albion mentions amphibious landings and cave rules. Yes, that's true. And also true that most players rarely play those. That's also true. Fighting wings is something I would actually like to investigate. OBA is something that's always confused me in ASL, and I've never played with it where I thought we did it, where it was like up to me and I thought I did it correctly. Let me put it that way. Braxis MF says, ASL works really well when both players work together to share the rules load. By that, I take it that you mean doing the inevitable rules lookups. There's actually, it's not that bad. You go to Oktoberfest, and yeah, there's people looking rules up, but it's not as bad as the reputation might suggest. I'd love to try Fighting Wings. I think I said that already. But I'd love to try that. That looks like an intriguing system. Then again, do I have room for fight? This is why I haven't picked it up, right? Or any of the games. Jeff Beeler asks, do the ASL cave rules use a 3D map? The short answer to that is no, they do not. It's somewhat abstract, but also kind of fussy and complicated. The index is good. Indexing is good table of contents, good index are really important, and that is a thing that we in hobby gaming are not particularly accustomed to games doing good jobs with an index or a table of contents. I have a generally very positive opinion of all of this fabulous Mongoose Traveler product. There's usually no index, and when there is, it's not good, and the table of contents is useless. easy place to make massive improvements would be in that area for these products. So, GMT was famous for not having indexes in their games, and now some of the recent things that I've gotten do have indexes, which is good. But a bad index is not that much more helpful than a no index, right? I do have all of the Devil Creek games. I've only played the Tannenberg stuff though, but I did like it very much. Doug, what are the right tools to do indexing? Because I've never done it. I only know, and this is going to sound kind of absurd, but the only reason I have any idea of how it can be done is because in one of his multiple autobiographies, Isaac Asimov described his process of building an index, where he basically went through every page with a huge stack of index cards. Frame maker. Ugh. I'm not even sure I know what that is. But if that works, I mean, that's the problem with a lot of these indexes. Is the automatic index compilation feature in Microsoft Word, which produces a shit index. ASL does cover Korea, and there are Spanish Civil War scenarios as well. And if you count third-party stuff, I don't know if there's no World War I stuff. Some of the third-party stuff might actually be World War I. Why anyone would want such an absurd thing, I have no idea. But Adobe's Premier Tech Document Solution. Okay, well, okay. Is it part of the Creative Suite? So, Mac Daddy mentions the ASL digital rules. And so one thing is the ASL, as mentioned, the ASL index is pretty good. But one of the reasons why I would specifically, if you're looking for an ASL rulebook, the physical rulebook's out of print half the time. You can get the Pocket Rules right now, and the Pocket Rulebook is nice, but I'd still recommend people go for the digital book right now anyway, because you can search it. That's a tremendous time saver. Now, you might have to... separate $1,000 plus license. How about that? Critical Hit does both Great War ASL and Civil War ASL. Products nobody asked for, and which are transparently ridiculous. Somebody was trying to dump some Civil War ASL at Compass Expo on the flea market tables last year. I'm sure it does more than just indexing, but and that's a professional. I mean, Word can build an index, but it's a shit index. So, Matt Davison mentions Ottoman Front is on his to play list. Those are interesting. So they were playing those in the 1915 scenarios at Winterfest, and there was some significant movement. FrameMaker might be some kind of legacy Adobe desktop publishing stuff. I've never really... I mean, I use the free equivalents. So there's a reason why Photoshop is the standard. It's really powerful. It's pretty hard to use at a proficient level, but it is a professional standard. I use GIMP, which is free, so that's why I use it, because I don't want to pay hundreds of dollars for PageMaker for either for Photoshop or for the Creative Suite, which is a monthly subscription. Now, I do use these days. I use Inkscape a lot more than I use GIMP. I do use GIMP here and there, but I use Inkscape a lot more. The Adobe equivalent to that is Illustrator, and again, Inkscape is free, and it's just as powerful, really. It's probably less well supported. But there's still plenty of power. I mean, I'm not like a super duper high-end Inkscape user, so it does more than I need it to do. And in fact, there's a whole bunch of stuff that it does that I don't know how to use. So there's that. Perfidious Albion says that it's so strange that the Russians haven't learned anything about logistics and spare parts since World War II. I'm not sure that's true, but clearly they forgot a bunch of stuff since like 1995 or so. Also, all that state-owned apparatus, like the armaments factories and all that stuff, all got sold off at pennies on the dollar to the oligarchs. So it's all in private hands now, right? And it's in, the kleptocrat hands that are not really particularly concerned about Russian national military efficiency. They're concerned about making more money. So Mr. John Madison, a frequenter of the stream, swears by Illustrator. And I have no doubt that it's better than Inkscape, but again, unless I was using it professionally, I am happy to stick with Inkscape and like dedicated myself to learning at a professional level. Then I don't think I can justify the cost. So I'm a little surprised, actually, that, they don't really do, I don't know. ASL Starship Troopers would be amusing to just, like, have a scenario, right? I wouldn't do a whole kit on that. But just to have a scenario would actually be, I think, fairly interesting. That could be fun. Christopher Prest mentions that, and I agree with him completely here, if you want to just buy one Der Weltkrieg box, then the Eastern Front box is the one to get. For a couple of reasons. One, it's a tremendous value for what you get an absolute ton of playable material in the box. It also includes the starter stuff, which is Tannenberg. So it's got a small, easy-to-play scenario, and the Galicia scenario is not much bigger. So you do Tannenberg, you do Galicia, then you can pretty much do whatever you want on the East Front. And you can scale the rest of it up, to small games, to big games, to very big games. So you've got a lot of different sizes of game you can get out of that Eastern Front box. In addition to that, the Eastern Front... There is some static fighting on the Eastern Front, but there's also always a lot of mobile fighting. Unlike the West Front, which is kind of fluid for a couple of months and then locks up largely. The West Front game is, by most accounts, fairly dull to actually play. For reasons, right? That's because that's how the West Front happened in World War I. So I do agree that the West Front one was the least important one to get. Stigler mentions that you can, if you split it 3 ways, that's not too expensive for Adobe Cloud. Lock and Load does have space infantry, which is a sci-fi tactical thing. There is a plugin for Inkscape that will let you manage your counter values in an Excel spreadsheet and then automate plugging them into the counters in Inkscape. I have not experimented with that at all. Yeah, but the Tannenberg scenario is short, so you're not like sitting there for days waiting for something to happen. You are able to kind of dial it back. So we're saying that Space Infantry is a whole IP now? Is it based on something? I didn't know that it was. I thought it was just, their space infantry combat game. That would be interesting. A sci-fi version of that. That might be the closest that you're going to get to sci-fi ASL, actually. I actually rather like Lock and Load Tactical. I think it's pretty fun to play. And if you want to do World War I squad level tactical and don't want to deal with ASL for whatever reason, Lock and Load Tactical is where I would go, actually. The only real problem is that you kind of got to figure out what to buy. I think you can buy any of those big box sets and run with that. But then again, you're stuck with the same problem with ASL too. You just have to. There's a lot more to buy because the product's been around for 40 years or whatever it's been. So let's talk about what's coming up. There's a lot coming up. So tomorrow, we're not done yet here, but I'll mention so I'm sure I get to, because there's actually a lot coming up. Tomorrow we got the stream with Dan. That's here. Our topic is Sicily 1943. I actually just said, screw it, I will have a topic. So that's already scheduled, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Tuesday, also in the morning, is Traveler Tuesday. So we've got that. I'm very excited about that video. That's the classic Traveler character creation video. Wednesday, we have an unboxing, flip through, and commentary of Griffin Island for RuneQuest 3rd Edition. Thursday, we will be unboxing the African campaign from Compass Games. New African campaign also looks very nice. I'm also very, very pleased with what I see of it so far. Friday, we have a bonus unboxing, which is C3I number 35 with the game Burma from Mr. Mark Herman. The magazine looks good. Like I mentioned, there's an number of interesting looking articles in there, but I want to particularly read that Vance von Borries article for obvious reasons. So excited about that. And then on Sunday, I think that's 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 to 9 Eastern on Sunday will be like my miscellaneous bullshit stream slot. So I think next Sunday I'm going to try and do a video game something. We'll see if that happens. There's a decent chance I'll be playing. Never mind. The new ESO expansion will not be out by then. Maybe the 2 Sundays after that. We'll see that. We'll see how that works. So that is that's what is scheduled right now. We have a couple new patrons, so thank you, new patrons. And I do have next week's extra RPG video already up as well. We got to do the Traveler Tuesday video for next week yet. So we'll try and get that done in our copious free time. Ha ha ha. So it's all good. I don't have any news for Lock and Load Publishing. Dave, welcome to the stream. Do we have any news on Glory and Empire? Because a bunch of us, we already talked about it a couple of times, a bunch of us are rather interested in having a closer look at that. I've got a job. That's why I got no time. I got no time for anything. I've had to turn a bunch of games down because I got no time. And I dropped one, and I still got no time. So, Perfidious out. Well, chaos is what Combat Commander's supposed to do, and it does do that. But I think one loses too much player agency for my tastes. Glory and Empire will be available very shortly on GameFound, which is the new crowdfunding. I don't know how new it is. But it is a crowdfunding platform that a lot of people who have become dissatisfied with Kickstarter for various reasons have gone to. Mayfair's war game options. Mayfair Games. I'm trying to think of war games that they did. They did the Hammer Slammers game, which I had at one point but never played. I had the Dragon Riders of Pern game somehow. And I think... no, I don't think so. Dave, Lock and Load Publishing, Marty is asking about Trial of Strength. Also very interested in Trial of Strength right here. So, yeah, I mean, I heard about Callendale losing his job. That, he will probably land on his feet. He is a highly qualified individual. And I know it's tough, but I think he will land on his feet. In the economy right now, it's not hard to get a job. And even shitty jobs are paying better now than they used to. Falklands War, that's true. I know there's at least a couple of Mayfair war games that I am forgetting about. The Down Below Station, that's interesting. Yeah, I haven't even thought about that in decades. I mean, I bought some of their RPG stuff back in the Roll Aids line, which was, I think, one of relatively few licensees that, for a while at least, was able to put the name Advanced Dungeons & Dragons on their front end. Looking for a job is a fucking hassle. Agreed completely. House Divided, good call, actually. I'd call that a war game, with no argument, and it's a total classic. Good catch on House Divided. I don't think of it as that trial. That is a redo of the Panther Games Trial of Strength, which is a very good game. Which is why I'm interested in learning. So Lock and Load Publishing says they need another pass yet. Which, if it needs another, I'd rather wait for it and it be absolutely gleamingly perfect when it comes out. Right. That I am completely cool with that. Rolaids wasn't licensed for part of its run anyway, and they did end up getting sued by TSR at some point. But for at least a little while, they were able to say AD&D on the covers, and they did some interesting stuff actually. And I say interesting intentionally, right? I didn't say good. I said interesting. They did this weird 3D cube dungeon that I had. Their elves book was kind of interesting. I was clearly, a Tolkien pastiche, but it was interesting. The TSR did that with GDW as well over Dangerous Journeys. They ended up settling. Which was TSR's objective in the first place, but TSR ended up buying the entire stock, and Gary snarkily said at the end of it, is like, hey, if you want to pay me $1 million to design a game, just write me a check and I'll just design you a game. We don't have to go through all this trouble. GDW, this is why that lawsuit did not hurt GDW, because TSR bought Dangerous Journeys and all the inventory. And I don't know what happened to all that inventory. It might have gotten pulped. The Simonich U.S. Civil War is outstanding. I agree completely. That happens. Like I said, with the developer issues with Trial of Strength, I'd rather have it be good than early. It's not like any of us are dying for games to play. Right? I'm good. I'm covered. I'd be curious to look at those retro rules, too. Christopher Prest mentions The World Undone, Galicia 1914. That looks interesting, actually. Forever War. I remember seeing that, but I've read the book. I've never played that. I'd be curious now to go through Mayfair's. What I think of from Mayfair is their versions of Phalanx stuff and rail games is kind of what I think of as what Mayfair did, and Catan, of course, in its last couple of decades. And in its last couple of decades, I think that's a fair assessment. But certainly in the 80s and 90s, they did a bunch of other stuff that was much more hobby gaming focused. And I think some decent and noteworthy things came out of them. They did some weird licensees, like they licensed the Alan Burt Akers Dre Prescott series for a module. I was fascinated by that. I'm like, why? This was like the only thing that you guys did. Why didn't we do more on this? You guys had this all to yourselves. Now, they say that the lawyer who represents himself has a fool for a client. I'm not a lawyer, so I have no idea. And yes, TSR did that multiple times. That was part of why TSR had a reputation for litigiousness equaled only probably by Palladium Books. And they sued a lot more people than Palladium Books did, but Palladium was very, very cockish about it, and unnecessarily aggressive. I mean, they sued the very young Wizards of the Coast at the time, for no particularly good reason. Well, okay, that's true. That's a fair. I don't, that may be a finer point that maybe that doesn't apply. But, Mayfair was around until just recently, really, so. Perfidious Albion, I completely agree. A lot of employers, not all, I mean, a lot more employers are now on board with the idea of remote people. Well, Kevin is a person. You like go to Kevin and talk to him at a con or something like that. He's a personable enough guy, right? And that's the extent of my personal interaction with Kevin Symbiota. But they made some company decisions that I think were unfounded, including, but not limited to, the lawsuit with Wizards of the Coast. Remember, this is pre-Magic the Gathering Wizards of the Coast, right? So it's literally Peter Atkinson and his garage. So they sued to take his garage away because they'd mentioned the Palladium games in the Primal Order. So, yeah, that's Captain Asparagus. That's my position on that as well. In addition, there's been a tendency for that company to alienate creative people in the hobby for reasons that seem linked to maybe some personal issues. A lot of wild claims have come out of that company that I think we have no particularly good reason to trust the official statements of. And that's about all I'm going to say, because they're probably going to sue me now. So they're still around. They're still around, and I don't necessarily have. I might snark about their products, but I don't have as negative an opinion about their products as that might seem to appear. There's a lot of neat ideas in their stuff, actually. It's just poorly organized, and the execution is always terrible. Yes, Stigler, absolutely right. A lot of it is middle management or sometimes upper management trying to exercise control in and that's all it's about, is just they're exercising control. I got to tell the hilarious story where Games Workshop, the early Games Workshop, this would have been in 1983, 1984, where Games Workshop got fucked by Avalon Hill over RuneQuest. So that was an amusing story, I thought. And maybe informs the later history of Games Workshop, for that matter. Tim Zales, I don't think it's ever going to go back to where it was before. I think there is a push to get people back in the office, but I don't think it will revert back to, and it will revert to some extent, and already is, but I don't think it will revert back to the way it was before for everybody. And for certain fields, that's just the way, like tech is just the way it is now. The expectation is that you'll work remote. I mean, the place I was working for, well, the new people are all in India, so they're clearly comfortable with it. And there are some professions where you got to have people on the site, right? So now my employer's also saying they want us in the office part of the time too, but they're also pretty flexible when I say, hey, I got the shits today. I'd rather stay home. So, well, the smallpox vaccine, did I get smallpox vaccinated? No. Smallpox vaccine is apparently proof against monkeypox, too. So all those old people that didn't wear a mask or get vaccinated against COVID all got smallpox vaccinations. I missed smallpox vaccinations by only about a year. Yes, this is all true. What the hell was that? Something fell in my closet. I'll check it out after the stream. Unless it's a cat, which would be a problem. Mike Anthony says if he has to return to the office, he'll retire. I mean, you just tell him that. It's like, look, I don't have to deal with this shit. I'm too old for this shit. I'm gonna retire. So I can either work from home or not work for you. So you take your pick. Quality on the operational studies group components. The maps and counters are top notch. The rulebooks are all black and white. If that's gonna all the rulebooks and support materials and stuff like that are all black and white. Some people will think that's cheap, but I don't care. So I think they are fine. I shouldn't have any cats in here at the moment. I'm happy to work from home. I go in 2 days a week is the usual routine. So, and it's on the other side of town, so it is a bit of a headache. But then again, it works out for me because the OCS game is on the same side of town. So I go on Thursday and again go get some fancy food for dinner, and then I go to the OCS game. So it all works for me. There is a color rulebook now for the rulebook itself is color, but there's not much color in it. And the study folder and all the play aids are all still black and white. They're on colored paper sometimes, but they're black and white. I am very much looking forward. We got to get to a bank and a lender and all that and deal with all that. But things are looking pretty good on that. So far, I want to get the hell out of here, and then I can do these things that people are asking me to do, like game cave videos and shit like that. Once there's a game cave, so. I mean, if it's going to be that much of a problem, you call them up and say, hey, I think I got COVID. I feel fine, but I don't want to come into the office. There's 2 weeks working from home right there. I'm just saying. The fencing. There you go. I think about doing like Tai Chi in the backyard, but I'd be too self-conscious about it. This house ain't much, but my backyard is fabulous. So I've been trying to spend more time in the backyard, which mostly means yard work at the moment, because there's a lot of additional, tree trimming and all kinds of shit like that's got to happen. So the Scotch cave, yes indeed. I would like to have a little wet bar. I don't need like a big fancy to do, but I'd love a little wet bar. Just so the Scotch can have a place to live. Perfidious Albion, to some extent, if you looked at it 10 years ago when I took a class on this exact subject, you'd be about right. But renewable stuff is a lot more efficient than it used to be, even 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. So the economics of that are becoming increasingly feasible. We really just need the will to do it and build, 1,000 square mile solar farm in the middle of the Arizona desert or something like that. And that's got environmental impacts as well that you got to keep in mind. So, well, we haven't put any investment into the national electrical grid in many decades, and we really haven't built any big bridges or skyscrapers or anything like that in many decades. I mean, you saw how long it took to rebuild the World Trade Center. New York City used to have a building like that going up once a month. We really don't build like that anymore. We let countries like Dubai and stuff like that have the tallest building in the world because we don't want to spend the money. Where's that money going? That's a great question. That's a great question that I would encourage people to ask. So, anyway, we have talked already about what is coming up just a little while ago, so I'm not going to go through it again. So just so we have covered, however, that there is a new RPG show, which is we've done one already, but it's pretty fluid, so expect the next one to look different. And we're probably going to continue to make adjustments as we continue to go. I'll have an announcement probably next week on that. But right now, we'll just say we're going to next broadcast that on the 5th of June, and then of course we do have an Origins show coming up. I actually have that. I forget when. I'm not going to look it up now. I do have that on a schedule. Boy, we could have a whole show on the era of the tank, but I would need to get actual experts on for that to feel like I was doing that topic justice. So the problem with nuclear power is, where do you put the waste? Right now, the answer is they're being stored at the nuclear power plants, and that's not a sustainable thing. We were going to build a national repository for nuclear waste that got shit canned. So there's literally nowhere for the waste to go. There are answers to those questions, but again, you need the will to do those things, right? So, all right. So thanks everybody for stopping by. Maybe we'll cut a couple minutes early. I'm okay with that. I'm going to continue to drink this scotch though. So I would like to thank everybody for stopping by. Do tune in to all the various things that are coming. There's a very aggressive slate of videos scheduled between now and the end of next week, when even some of next week's videos are already filmed and uploaded. So I've been doing a very good job of keeping videos going for you folks, and they're mostly wargaming videos, but I've got 1 to 2 RPG videos a week as well coming to try and build the channel out in that department. So do subscribe, do like the video if you have not already done so. There are links in the video description to places like Twitch and the digital channel, where I have actually uploaded some content. As of the middle of last week, I uploaded a new video on 6 Ages, which is one of the 2 Glorantha video games. So check that out if you're interested. There's a link in the video description. Subscribe to that channel. Follow me on Twitch. Blah, 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 blah. My social media presence, I'm on Facebook. I post all this shit to Facebook, but I actually participate on Twitter. So if you're going to follow me somewhere on social media, it is most meaningful to do that on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, don't get on Twitter because I said so. But if you're on Twitter, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. There's a link to that in the video description as well. So everything is good. So I will see everybody next week.